Commander Reese Harrison had learned to trust his gut over his 15 years in space. That's why he couldn't shake the nagging feeling as he walked through the pristine corridors of Orbital Station Gamma 7 with his Viridian counterpart, Science Director Zach Still. "You seem distracted, Commander," Zach Still observed, his crystalline eyes refracting the station's ambient light. The Viridian's tall, willowy frame towered over Harrison as they conducted their routine inspection. "Something's off," Harrison muttered, pausing to press his hand against the corridor wall. The vibration was almost imperceptible, but it shouldn't have been there at all. The reactor's running hot. Zach Still consulted his diagnostic tablet, the device's holographic display showing nothing but normal readings. "All systems are operating within acceptable parameters, Commander. The quantum core is stable, and the containment fields are at optimal strength." Harrison shook his head, already moving toward the reactor control room. "Run a deep scan. Focus on the magnetic containment system." "Commander, I must protest. We have no evidence of any malfunction. These routine inspections are merely formality." The words died in Zach Still's throat as Harrison pulled up the reactor's auxiliary controls. The commander's fingers flew across the holographic interface, bypassing several security protocols to access the system's raw data. There, Harrison pointed to a seemingly random pattern in the containment field's power distribution. "The field strength is fluctuating. Micro-variations, building up slowly." Zach Still's natural bioluminescence dimmed slightly, the Viridian equivalent of a frown. "Impossible. Our sensors would have detected any significant." "They're not significant." "Not yet." Harrison was already initiating emergency protocols. "But they're following a pattern. In about 6 hours, they would have synchronized and created a cascade failure in the containment field." The Viridian scientist fell silent, his crystalline fingers dancing across his own console as he ran the calculations. His bioluminescence flickered rapidly as the numbers confirmed Harrison's suspicion. "By the first light," Zach Still whispered, "the containment field would have collapsed. The entire station." "How did you know?" Harrison shrugged as he worked to stabilize the reactor. "Experience. Intuition. Call it what you want, but something just felt wrong." "Felt wrong." Zach Still's tone carried equal parts fascination and skepticism. "Commander, you detected a quantum-level containment field instability because it felt wrong." "It's not just me," Harrison explained, finally satisfied with the reactor's stabilization. "Humans have always had this ability to sense when something's not right. Call it a sixth sense, gut instinct, whatever. It's kept us alive through countless close calls." Zach Still's crystalline structure shimmered with interest, a sign of intense curiosity among his species. "Fascinating. You're suggesting humans possess some form of danger detection ability that operates independently of logical analysis. More like pattern recognition operating below conscious awareness," Harrison offered. "We pick up on subtle cues without realizing it. The trick is learning to listen when your instincts try to tell you something." The news of Harrison's lucky catch spread quickly through the station. Within hours, the commander found himself summoned to a meeting with the station's governing council, Zach Still accompanying him as a witness. Council Elder Vorkath, a massive centaurian with iridescent scales, leaned forward in his gravity-adjusted seat. "Let me understand this correctly. You initiated emergency protocols and disrupted station operations based on a feeling." "Based on experience and observation, Elder," Harrison corrected respectfully. "The evidence was there in the data. I just noticed something was wrong before the automated systems caught it." "Impossible," declared Council Representative Ixel, her tentacles writhing in agitation. "Our systems are the most advanced in known space. They cannot be outperformed by primitive instinct." Zach Still stepped forward, his crystalline form pulsing with conviction. "The evidence is irrefutable. Commander Harrison prevented a catastrophic reactor failure hours before our systems would have detected the problem. This is not the first documented case of human intuition proving remarkably accurate in crisis situations. The council chamber erupted in overlapping voices and translated arguments. Harrison stood quietly, knowing that this moment represented more than just a averted disaster. It was another example of humanity's unique contribution to the galactic community. Elder Vorkath raised a scaled hand for silence. Commander Harrison, your actions saved countless lives today. But this incident raises important questions about human capabilities that we may have overlooked. With respect, Elder, Harrison replied, humans have always relied on our instincts alongside our technology. It's not about one being better than the other. It's about using every tool at our disposal to keep people safe. As the council continued their deliberations, Harrison caught Zach Still studying him with renewed interest. The Viridian scientist's crystalline structure sparkled with what Harrison had learned to recognize as excitement. This bears further study, Commander, Zach Still said quietly. If humans possess some form of enhanced threat detection ability, it could revolutionize our understanding of consciousness and survival adaptations. Harrison smiled slightly. Just remember, Zach Still, sometimes the most important thing isn't understanding how it works, but knowing when to listen to it. As they left the council chamber, Harrison's gut was already telling him that this was just the beginning of a much larger discovery. And as always, he was inclined to trust that feeling. Dr. Nadia Patel stood before the holographic display, watching as data streams from dozens of incidents scrolled past her eyes. Each case represented another instance of human intuition preventing disaster in deep space. The research lab aboard the galactic science vessel Horizon hummed with quiet energy as alien scientists worked alongside their human counterparts. The statistical probability is becoming impossible to ignore, remarked Dr. Tekler, her Arcturian colleague. The jellyfish-like alien floated in his containment sphere, his transparent body pulsing with neural activity. Humans are detecting threats at a rate far exceeding random chance. Nadia nodded, highlighting a particular incident with a gesture. Look at this one from the mining colony on Proxima B. A human supervisor evacuated an entire shaft 10 minutes before a structural collapse. When asked why, she said the air felt wrong. Felt wrong, Tekler repeated, his tentacles twirling in what Nadia had learned was amusement. Your species continues to confound our understanding of sensory perception. Before Nadia could respond, her comm unit chimed. Dr. Patel, urgent transmission from Outpost Delta 3. The ship's AI announced. The holographic display shifted, showing a harried-looking station administrator. Dr. Patel, we've had another incident. Third one this month. Our human maintenance chief insisted on running a full diagnostic on our atmospheric processors. Said something about the recycled air-tasting metallic. Turns out there was a microscopic crack in one of the primary filtration units. Nadia's fingers flew across her console, adding the new data point to her growing collection. Any previous warning signs? Automated alerts? None. Systems showed green across the board. If he hadn't insisted, the administrator left the implications hanging. After the transmission ended, Tekler drifted closer to the display. The pattern of these incidents is itself concerning. They appear to be increasing in frequency. I noticed that too, Nadia said, pulling up a timeline. What's more interesting is the distribution. These aren't random equipment failures or accidents. They're happening at key strategic locations across human-alien cooperative projects. The lab's door hissed open, admitting Commander Harrison and Science Director Zach Still. Since the Gamma-7 incident had become unofficial advisors to the research team. Dr. Patel, Harrison greeted her. Your message said you found something. Nadia gestured at the holographic display, expanding the incident map. Look at the pattern. Each of these points represents a potential disaster prevented by human intuition. Now watch what happens when I overlay strategic resource routes and political boundaries. The map shifted, new layers of data appearing. The incident locations aligned almost perfectly with major trade routes and political flashpoints between various alien factions. That's not coincidence, Harrison said, his expression darkening. No, Nadia agreed. Someone's testing our capabilities. They're deliberately creating situations that would trigger human intuitive responses. Zaxtil's crystalline form flickered with concern. The implications are disturbing. If these incidents are intentional, then we're dealing with a coordinated effort to study human abilities. Tekler finished, his tentacles writhing agitatedly. Harrison stepped closer to the display, studying the pattern. Can we trace who might be behind this? Not directly, Nadia replied. But I've been analyzing the technical signatures of the various malfunctions. They're sophisticated, well hidden, but there are commonalities. Whoever's doing this has access to advanced technology and detailed knowledge of both human and alien systems. The Nexus Collective, Zaxtil said suddenly, his crystalline structure pulsing with agitation. They've always been interested in studying emerging species, and they have the resources to orchestrate something like this. Harrison's jaw tightened. The collective is supposed to be a scientific research organization. This goes way beyond ethical research parameters. Perhaps they believe the potential benefits outweigh ethical concerns, Tekler suggested. Human intuitive abilities could revolutionize early warning systems, threat detection, even military applications. That's not their decision to make, Nadia said firmly. They're putting lives at risk to satisfy their curiosity. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Nexus Collective was one of the oldest and most respected scientific organizations in known space. Accusing them of orchestrating dangerous experiments would have serious diplomatic repercussions. We need proof, Harrison said finally. Hard evidence that links these incidents to the collective. Nadia nodded, already pulling up new data streams. I've been developing an algorithm to track subtle signs of tampering in affected systems. If we can predict where they might strike next, we can catch them in the act. Zaxtil finished, his crystalline form brightening with purpose. There's something else, Nadia added, highlighting a section of her research. These incidents aren't just testing our ability to sense danger. They're becoming more complex, more subtle. It's like they're pushing to understand the limits of human intuition. Harrison's expression was grim. Which means whatever they're planning, this is just the beginning. They're working up to something bigger. As if to punctuate his words, the ship's emergency alert system suddenly blared to life. Warning. Anomaly detected in primary power grid. All personnel report to emergency stations. Harrison and Nadia exchanged looks. Both of them had felt it. A subtle wrongness in the ship's vibrations moments before the alarm sounded. Looks like we might get our proof sooner than we thought, Harrison said, already moving toward the door. Dr. Patel, I think your research just became a lot more urgent. Lieutenant James Walsh pressed his palm against the cold metal wall of Deep Space Station Epsilon 12, eyes closed in concentration. His partner, Security Officer Kirax of the Centaurian Defense Force, watched with a mixture of fascination and skepticism, mandibles clicking softly. There's definitely something here, Walsh muttered, moving his hand slowly across the surface. The vibration pattern is wrong. Too regular. Kirax consulted his scanner, compound eyes reflecting the device's soft glow. Energy readings are within normal parameters, Lieutenant. Perhaps your human instincts are mistaken this time. Walsh shook his head, already pulling tools from his utility belt. Not mistaken. Different. This isn't like the other incidents. It's too perfect. He began removing the wall panel, revealing a maze of conduits and circuitry. See that? Kirax leaned closer, his armored carapace scraping softly against the metal. By the first nest, hidden among the standard power conduits, was a device about the size of Walsh's palm, pulsing with a faint blue light. That's not station equipment, Walsh confirmed, carefully scanning the device without touching it. And it's not trying to cause a malfunction. It's measuring something. Their discovery was the latest in a string of similar finds across multiple stations and outposts. Ever since Dr. Patel's team had identified the pattern of incidents, Walsh and Kirax have been tasked with investigating potential Nexus collective activities in the sector. Walsh's comm unit chirped, "Lieutenant, this is Dr. Patel. We've analyzed the data from your last 3 finds. The devices aren't just measuring human responses, they're creating controlled test conditions." Controlled tests. Walsh frowned, studying the device more closely. What kind of conditions? They're generating subtle environmental changes, variations in vibration patterns, atmospheric composition, electromagnetic fields. Things that might trigger human intuitive responses without being obvious enough to detect. Kirax's antennae twitched. The collective is not merely studying human abilities. They are attempting to quantify and replicate them. That's our theory, Dr. Patel confirmed. Commander Harrison wants you to leave this device in place for now. We're setting up a trap. Over the next few hours, Walsh and Kirax carefully documented the device's location and configuration while making it appear their inspection had missed it. As they worked, Walsh couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "Something's changed," he said suddenly, straightening up. "The air pressure, it's shifting." Kirax checked his scanner again. Atmospheric systems showed normal. He stopped as emergency klaxons began blaring throughout the station. Warning: hull breach detected in Section 7. Emergency containment protocols initiated. Walsh was already moving, Kirax close behind. "That's 2 sections over from the device we found. Not a coincidence." They rounded a corner to find chaos. Station personnel were evacuating as emergency barriers began descending. Through a viewport, Walsh caught glimpse of a sleek ship detaching from the station's hull. Kirax, scan that vessel. The Centaurian's fingers flew across his scanner. Unknown configuration. Highly advanced stealth systems. His mandibles clicked in frustration. "It's gone. They must have some form of quantum displacement drive." Walsh tapped his comm unit. "Bridge, this is Lieutenant Walsh. We need a full record of all ships docked or in proximity to the station in the last 6 hours." "Negative, Lieutenant," came the response. "Our sensor logs for the past hour are corrupted." Someone knew exactly what they were doing. Back in the damage section, repair crews were already at work. The hull breach was precise and controlled, designed to create an emergency without risking catastrophic damage. "They're escalating," Walsh said, examining the breach pattern. "This wasn't just about testing human intuition. They wanted to see how we'd react to an actual crisis." Kirax's compound eyes studied his partner. "You believe they are preparing for something larger." "Yeah, and I don't think we're going to like what it is." Hours later, Walsh and Kirax joined a secure conference call with Commander Harrison, Dr. Patel, and representatives from various allied species. The mood was tense as they reviewed the evidence. "The device we found was more sophisticated than previous ones," Walsh reported. "It wasn't just gathering data. It was actively creating test conditions. And the hull breach, that was a field test." Dr. Patel's holographic image nodded. "The collective is systematically analyzing every aspect of human intuitive abilities. They're not just studying it anymore. They're trying to understand how to manipulate it, or defend against it." Commander Harrison added grimly, "If they see human intuition as a potential threat." "But why?" asked a Viridian representative, their crystalline form shimmering with concern. "The collective has always maintained peaceful relations with all species. Because we represent something they can't quantify," Dr. Patel explained. "Human intuition operates outside their models and predictions. For an organization built on understanding and controlling scientific principles, we're an anomaly they need to solve," Walsh finished. "And they're willing to put lives at risk to do it." Kirax stepped forward, his carapace gleaming under the station lights. "There is another possibility. Perhaps they seek not to defend against human abilities, but to weaponize them." The suggestion sent a chill through the conference. The idea of the Nexus Collective attempting to harness and weaponize human intuition was disturbing on multiple levels. Whatever their goal, Harrison said, we need to find their base of operations. These tests are building toward something, and we're running out of time to stop it. Walsh felt the familiar prickle at the back of his neck, the same feeling that had led him to discover the hidden device. Sir, I think I might know where to start looking. The device we found. Its power signature had a unique frequency. If we can track similar emissions, we might find their research facility. Dr. Patil finished, already typing rapidly. I'll recalibrate our sensor networks. As the conference continued, Walsh caught Kiriak studying him with those inscrutable compound eyes. Your instincts have not been wrong yet, Lieutenant, the Centaurian said quietly. What do they tell you now? Walsh stared at the holographic display of known collective activities, feeling the persistent sense of wrongness growing stronger. They tell me we're missing something big, something right in front of us. And when we figure out what it is, he shook his head. We better be ready. Commander Harrison stood before the Galactic Council's emergency session, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon him. The vast chamber, with its soaring crystalline arches and hovering platforms, held representatives from every major spacefaring civilization. Dr. Patil stood beside him, her presence steady and reassuring. You come before us with grave accusations, intoned High Counselor Vextera, her energy form shimming with barely contained skepticism. The Nexus Collective has been a pillar of galactic scientific advancement for millennia. Where is your evidence? With respect, High Counselor, Harrison replied. The evidence is in the pattern. He gestured, and Dr. Patil activated their holographic presentation. Over 300 incidents in the past 6 months, each one carefully orchestrated to test human intuitive responses. Orchestrated, scoffed Counselor Drath, his scaled face twisting in derision. You cannot prove these events were connected. Humans simply have a tendency to overreact to normal mechanical failures. Dr. Patil stepped forward. We've analyzed the technical signatures of each incident. The programming architecture is identical, just obscured by different surface implementations. Look at the base code structure. The holographic display zoomed in on lines of alien programming, highlighting matching patterns across multiple incidents. Murmurs rippled through the chamber as council members studied the data. Interesting, rumbled Elder Kathox, their crystalline form refracting light in thoughtful patterns. But circumstantial. The collective's programming protocols are widely used throughout known space. Harrison felt frustration building, but kept his voice steady. 2 hours ago, Lieutenant Walsh and Officer Kirax discovered another testing device on Deep Space Station Epsilon 12. Before we could secure it, a ship with advanced stealth technology breached the station's hull and retrieved the device. A convenient story, Drath sneered. Yet you have no sensor logs, no visual evidence. Because they were deliberately erased, Dr. Patil interrupted. The attack was precisely calculated. They knew exactly how to cover their tracks. High Counselor Vextera's energy form pulsed with annoyance. Even if what you say is true, what possible motive would the collective have for these actions? They have always shared their research openly with the Council. Harrison exchanged a glance with Dr. Patil before answering. We believe they see human intuition as a threat to their fundamental understanding of the universe, our ability to sense danger, to recognize patterns below the threshold of conscious awareness. It challenges their models of reality. The chamber erupted in overlapping voices and translated arguments. Harrison waited, knowing they were losing ground. Without hard evidence, the Council would never act against an institution as powerful as the Nexus Collective. His comm unit vibrated silently. A message from Walsh. Commander, we found something. Get Dr. Patil to check the quantum frequency analysis of the station's power grid during the breach. Harrison discreetly passed the message to Patil, who quickly accessed the data on her tablet. Her eyes widened. High Counselor, she called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. I have new evidence. The holographic display shifted, showing complex energy patterns. During the hull breach at Epsilon 12, our sensors detected a unique quantum signature, one that matches theoretical models for consciousness manipulation technology. It got their attention. Consciousness manipulation was strictly forbidden under galactic law. Too many species had nearly destroyed themselves experimenting with it. The collective isn't just studying human intuition, Patel continued. They're trying to artificially replicate it. These tests weren't just about understanding our abilities. They were calibrating their technology. Elder Cathox's crystalline form darkened with concern. Such research would violate dozens of treaties. The implications are worse than you think, Harrison added. Lieutenant Walsh reports that the testing devices are becoming more sophisticated. They're not just observing anymore. They're actively attempting to influence human intuitive responses. High Counselor Vexterra's energy form flickered rapidly, a sign of deep disturbance. To what end? Control, Harrison said simply. If they can understand and manipulate human intuition, they can neutralize what they see as an unpredictable variable in their equations, or weaponize it for their own use. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Even Counselor Drath looked troubled. We need time to verify these claims, Vexterra said finally. The Council cannot act without. The chamber's emergency systems suddenly flared to life, bathing everything in red light. Harrison felt it before the alarm sounded, that familiar prickle of wrongness that had saved his life so many times before. Everyone out, he shouted, already moving toward the High Counselor. The chamber's been compromised. Seconds later, the chamber's atmospheric processors began malfunctioning, filling the air with an invisible but deadly neurotoxin. Thanks to Harrison's warning, emergency protocols engaged in time. As council members were evacuated to safety, sensor logs confirmed what Harrison had instinctively known. The attack bore the same technical signatures they'd been tracking. Hours later, in a secure conference room, High Counselor Vexterra's energy form pulsed with newfound respect as she addressed Harrison and Dr. Patel. It seems we owe you an apology, Commander. And our thanks. Without your intuition, we would have suffered severe casualties. The collective is getting bolder, Harrison replied. They're not just testing anymore. They're demonstrating their capabilities. And sending us a message, Patel added. They wanted us to know they could reach us even here. Vexterra's form shimmered with determination. Then we shall send them a message in return. The Council hereby authorizes full investigation into Nexus collective activities. You will have whatever resources you require. As they left the conference, Harrison's comm unit chimed with another message from Walsh. Commander, we've traced the quantum signature. You're not going to believe where it leads. Harrison looked at Patel, seeing his own grim determination mirrored in her eyes. The real fight was just beginning. The quantum signature led to the last place anyone expected, the Galactic Archives, humanity's own repository of knowledge and cultural heritage. Lieutenant Walsh stared at the massive structure floating in space, its crystalline spires reflecting starlight like frozen lightning. It was right under our noses, he muttered to Kirax as their stealth shuttle maintained position just outside the archive's sensor range. They weren't just studying us, they were using our own data against us. Dr. Patel's voice crackled over the secure comm channel. The archives contain everything about human history, biology, and psychology. The collective didn't need to run all those tests. They were calibrating their results against centuries of human data. And we gave them unlimited access, Commander Harrison added, his holographic image flickering slightly, as a gesture of trust when Earth joined the Galactic Concord. Walsh felt that familiar tension in his gut, the warning sense that had saved his life countless times. They're in there right now. Something big is happening. Kirax's compound eyes studied the sensor readings. Energy signatures are significantly above normal parameters. Whatever they are planning, it appears to be reaching its culmination. All teams in position, Harrison announced. Remember, we need to catch them in the act. The Council won't act without irrefutable evidence. Walsh checked his weapons one last time. The non-lethal stun charges felt inadequate against what they might face, but the archives were too precious to risk more destructive options. Ready when you are, Commander. The infiltration began smoothly, too smoothly. Walsh's sense of wrongness grew stronger with each unopposed corridor they passed. Karax moved silently beside him, his armored carapace barely making a sound. They found the first body in the xenobiology section, a Viridian researcher, their crystalline form darkened and lifeless. No signs of violence, Karax reported after scanning. Neural patterns simply stopped. They're testing their consciousness manipulation technology. Dr. Patel's voice was grim over the comm. Be careful. We don't know its full capabilities yet. The central data core was a vast chamber filled with quantum storage crystals, each one containing thousands of years of human knowledge. The sight that greeted them there made Walsh's blood run cold. Dozens of Nexus Collective scientists worked at floating consoles, their silver environmental suits marking them as members of the organization's inner circle. But it was the device at the chamber center that drew all attention. A massive crystalline structure pulsing with dark energy. By the first nest, Karax whispered, "That's not just a consciousness manipulator. That's a consciousness encoder." They're not trying to replicate human intuition, Walsh realized. They're trying to extract it, to download it directly from human minds. Harrison's voice cut through their horror. "All teams, move in. Shut them down. Now." The chamber erupted into chaos. Security teams burst in from multiple entrances, but the collective scientists barely seemed to notice. Their leader, a tall figure in an ornate silver suit, turned calmly to face the intruders. "Ah, right on schedule." The figure's voice was artificially modulated, gender-neutral and eerily calm. "Your intuitive abilities really are remarkable. We calculated a 93.7% probability you would discover us at this precise moment." "Shut down the device," Harrison demanded, having arrived with another team. "You're in violation of multiple galactic laws." "Laws?" The leader seemed amused. "We are pursuing understanding. Your species represents a fundamental contradiction in our models of consciousness. You perceive patterns that should be imperceptible, sense dangers that have not yet manifested. It is an anomaly that must be resolved." The device's pulsing intensified, and Walsh felt a strange pressure building in his mind. Around him, other human security officers began to stumble, clutching their heads. "Your intuitive abilities arise from quantum entanglement patterns in your neural networks," the leader explained. "Patterns we can now isolate, extract, and replicate. Imagine the possibilities. Perfect threat detection, unlimited pattern recognition, all without the messy unpredictability of human consciousness." Dr. Patel's voice cut through the growing mental fog. "You're wrong. Human intuition isn't just about pattern recognition. It's about connection. To each other, to our environment, to the countless subtle cues we've evolved to notice. You can't just extract it like data from a computer." The leader tilted their head. "A charming belief, but ultimately irrelevant. The process has already begun." Walsh fought against the pressure in his mind, trying to focus. Something felt wrong. More wrong than the obvious attack on their consciousness. A pattern he was missing. Then it hit him. "The crystals," he gasped. "They're not just storing data. They're amplifying the device's effect, using our own recorded experiences to strengthen their signal." Karax immediately understood. "If we overload the storage crystals, we could create a feedback loop," Patel finished. "Disrupt their entire system." Harrison didn't hesitate. "Do it." Walsh and Karax moved in perfect sync, firing their weapons at carefully chosen crystals. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The device's dark energy pulse rebounded through the crystal network, creating a cascade of quantum feedback. "No," the collective leader screamed. "You'll destroy years of research." "Better than destroying what makes us human," Walsh grunted, fighting through the mental pressure to target one final crystal. The explosion of energy was silent but devastating. The consciousness encoder imploded, taking most of the collective's research with it. As the dust settled, Walsh felt the pressure in his mind evaporate, replaced by the familiar, comfortable hum of his own intuition. Harrison stood among the ruins of the device, facing the captured collective scientists. You tried to quantify something that can't be measured. Human intuition isn't a weapon to be controlled or a resource to be extracted. It's part of who we are. The leader, now in restraints, seemed genuinely puzzled. How can you accept such uncertainty in your existence? To rely on feelings and hunches rather than pure data and logic? Walsh stepped forward, Kyriax at his side. That's exactly what you never understood. The uncertainty, the mystery, that's not a flaw in the system. That's what makes it work. 3 weeks after the confrontation at the Galactic Archives, Commander Harrison found himself once again before the Council, but this time the atmosphere was markedly different. The chamber hummed with excited discussion as Dr. Patel presented their final findings. The Nexus Collective's research, while ethically abhorrent, has inadvertently provided us with remarkable insights into human consciousness, she explained, manipulating the holographic display. Their attempts to quantify human intuition revealed something they never expected. It's not just a neural phenomenon, but a quantum one. High Counselor Vexterra's energy form pulsed with interest. Explain, Doctor. Human consciousness exists in a state of quantum entanglement with our environment, Patel continued. We don't just observe patterns, we're part of them. Our intuition isn't about prediction. It's about connection. Lieutenant Walsh and Officer Kyriax stood at the chamber's edge, watching the presentation. Walsh couldn't help but smile as he remembered the collective leader's confusion during interrogation. They kept trying to isolate the mechanism, he murmured to Kyriax. They couldn't accept that the uncertainty was the mechanism. Your species continues to surprise us. Kyriax replied, mandibles clicking thoughtfully. What the collective saw as a flaw, we now understand is an evolutionary advantage. The holographic display shifted to show neural mapping data. The collective's consciousness encoder failed because they approached human intuition as a program to be extracted and replicated, Patel explained. But it's not code, it's a relationship, a dynamic interaction between human consciousness and the quantum fabric of space-time itself. And this interaction, Elder Kathox rumbled, their crystalline form refracting light in curious patterns, it cannot be artificially reproduced. Not without the fundamental framework of human consciousness. Harrison stepped in. The collective tried to separate the ability from the being. They might as well have tried to separate waves from the ocean. The chamber filled with thoughtful murmurs as council members processed the implications. Even Counselor Drath, once their harshest critic, seemed impressed. This presents both opportunities and challenges, Vexterra announced. The collective's actions cannot go unpunished, but their research suggests humans possess capabilities we never imagined. Capabilities that could benefit all species if properly understood and respected. Dr. Patel nodded. We're already seeing applications in early warning systems, search and rescue operations, even diplomatic negotiations. By working with human intuition rather than trying to control it, we're achieving results the collective never could. Which brings us to our proposal, Harrison said, straightening. We're establishing a new division within the Galactic Science Authority, the Human Intuitive Sciences Department. Not to study human intuition as a phenomenon to be conquered, but as a bridge between different ways of understanding the universe. Walsh felt a familiar tingle at the base of his skull. Not a warning this time, but a sense of rightness. He caught Kyriax watching him and shrugged. Feels like we're on the right track. The Centaurian's compound eyes glittered with what Walsh had learned was amusement. I have learned to trust such feelings, my friend. The council chambers buzzed with excited discussion as representatives from various species offered support and resources for the new department. Dr. Patel's presentation continued, showing early results from voluntary collaboration with human intuitive abilities. We've already seen remarkable success in combining human intuition with alien technologies, she explained. The Viridian's crystalline computing networks, enhanced by human pattern recognition, have developed early warning systems far more effective than anything we had before. And the Centaurian defense grids, Kyrax added, stepping forward. Human intuitive insights have helped us identify vulnerabilities we never knew existed. High Counselor Vexterra's energy form brightened with approval. It seems we owe humanity an apology. We saw your intuitive abilities as primitive, a reminder of evolution's early stages. Now we understand they represent evolution's next step forward. Harrison smiled slightly. Not forward, High Counselor. Just different. Every species brings its own gifts to the galaxy. Ours happens to be embracing uncertainty and finding patterns in chaos. Indeed, Elder Kathox agreed. The collective sought to eliminate uncertainty from the equation. They never understood that uncertainty itself is part of the solution. As the session concluded, Walsh found himself in a quiet corridor with Kyrax, Dr. Patel, and Commander Harrison. The sense of rightness had only grown stronger. So, Walsh said, "What's our next challenge?" "The collective wasn't working alone," Harrison replied grimly. "Our intuition tells us there's more to uncover." Patel nodded. Their research facilities have been found across 12 different sectors. Someone was funding them, protecting them. We need to find out who. And when we do, Kyrax added, they will learn what we now know, that human intuition is not a weakness to be exploited, but a strength to be respected. Walsh felt that familiar tingle again, the universe whispering its warnings and possibilities. "Well then," he said, checking his weapon, "I've got a feeling we should start with the Outer Rim colonies. Something tells me we'll find our answers there." Harrison grinned. "Lead the way, Lieutenant. After all, when humans sense danger, you'd better listen." They finished together. As they headed toward their next mission, Walsh reflected on how far they'd come. The Nexus Collective had tried to reduce human intuition to equations and code, never understanding that its real power lay in its mystery, in accepting uncertainty, in trusting the subtle whispers of the universe. Humanity had found its place among the stars, and somewhere in the quantum fabric of space-time, patterns were emerging, dangers were brewing, and human intuition was already beginning to sense them. The next adventure was calling, and they were ready to answer.